Hello and welcome to the Soul Aligned Leader Masterclass interview series on thriving as an awakened soul aligned leader, alchemizing your purpose, embodying your gifts, and stepping into your unique service-based business. We're so delighted that you're joining us on this powerful journey and that you're stepping deeper into your soul's work at this time. It's such an incredible time for humanity, and it's so important that we step up right now. I'm your host, Shirley Lohmaier, and today we have Nilima Bhat with us. I'm so excited to have you with us, Nilima. Nilima is a leader in the fields of personal mastery, leadership, gender equality, and well-being. She is the co-author of 2 books, Shakti Leadership and My Cancer is Me. She is the founder of the Global Shakti Fellowship Program for Women Changemakers. And in general, she's just an incredible powerhouse. And I know you're going to feel that in this interview because you can just feel her presence as it oozes forth such leadership and such wisdom. And today, Nilima is sharing with us about Shakti leadership. So welcome, Nilima. Thank you so much for being here. Delighted.
Thanks for having me, Shirley. It's been a delight discovering you in South Africa.
Absolutely.
So it's so nice to feel all these women around the world suddenly popping like popcorn,
100%. Yeah, it's time. Feminine rising, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a great place would be for you just to share a little bit about your keys of your awakening journey or the highlights of your story, so that people can really resonate with where you come from.
Yeah. So I had a very classic, I would say fairly privileged upbringing, middle class, upper middle class, father naval officer in India. So grew up in many places, including Germany. And then everyone does the thing, which is you join the corporate world and you get on the rat race. And so by 32, I had the trophy husband, I had the boy, the girl, 3 years apart, and 10 years of corporate work. I was looking after corporate communications for 25 countries across Asia Pacific for ESPN, Star Sports, very well-known sport television. And I had this huge existential crisis. Who am I? What am I doing with my life? I've earned pots of money. I bought the house, but what am I doing with my life? Have I made a difference? Have I made an impact? And for better or for worse, my mother had put this thought into my head very early. She'd had some person read her horoscope and who had said, you'll have 2 children and the younger one's going to do something that's going to kind of change the world or help the world or whatever. It's basically going to be a world kind of job.
Wow.
So I was thinking,
this doesn't
feel like writing press releases. So I gave up my full-time corporate career and I took up the study of yoga and Vedanta in search of meaning and purpose. And by this time, my husband got posted from Singapore to London. And it was perfect because the Shivananda Yoga Center was 15 minutes down the road from Wimbledon in Putney. And I felt I came home to yoga, to Vedanta. The journey began. 2 years into that, my husband got diagnosed with colon cancer. So then it became a journey to his recovery and health. And so we came back to India in 2004. We started Roots and Wings Consulting, which is a leadership advisory. And we brought everything we were learning about conscious leadership, conscious culture, how corporate cultures of today are creating burnout. And this is like back in 2004, before it became a thing.
Yeah.
And along the way, I qualified as a yoga teacher. And after we wrote the first book, My Cancer is Me, The Journey from Illness to Wholeness, which was about his recovery through cancer, and then setting up an integrative medicine practice in a clinical setting. And I took several cancer patients through that journey. So those case studies became the first book. But as soon as that book was out, I knew I need to write my second book. This is about my journey of awakening as a woman, as my mother's daughter, as an Indian woman. I'd learned so much, and it wasn't just about health and well-being. It was somewhere also about awakening out of the patriarchy. And so this whole work of Shakti leadership, embracing feminine and masculine power in business, because by now we've become part of this collective called the Chitta Sangha, which is a consciousness collaborative of teachers, trainers, coaches, facilitators. And I'd met Raj Sisodia, who is a co-founder of the conscious capitalism movement. So one of the tenets of conscious capitalism is conscious leadership, in addition to conscious cultures, stakeholder integration, and a higher purpose beyond profit. So I said to him, everything depends on leadership. It's conscious leaders who will create the other three tenets. So we need to offer the world a conscious leadership model that works for both men and women, and for the East and the West, the global North and the global South. So we need a new leadership model, and let's draw from ancient wisdom sitting right here in our country of origin, that's India.
Beautiful. And so that's how Shakti leadership was born.
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. And so what is the link to Shakti? I mean, what is the spirituality behind Shakti that comes forward for that?
So after I became a yoga teacher trained in the Shivananda tradition of the Divine Life Society, which is in Rishikesh, I very naturally felt I was brought to the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the mother of Pondicherry. And one of India's greatest masters and freedom fighters, Sri Aurobindo, and then his spiritual partner was a lady called Mira Alfasa. She was born in Paris, but she had an Egyptian mother and a Turkish father. And anyway, people can read up about them. They are just amazing. But the integral yoga basically says that, we can do all the work we want to do on ourselves, but the real shift in consciousness towards unity and evolution is going to come from surrendering to this principle called Shakti, that is the source force of the universe. And it's the mother principle from which we all emanate and in whom we exist and through whom we alchemize and evolve. So it's a profound intelligence, it's creative, it's infinite, and it's for us we're like fish. We're already swimming in it, but we're the last to know it, like fish are the last to know water. So we, up until now, this force of the universe, that Shakti, the innate power of creation is Shakti. It's what is evolving the creation. And up until now, as the created beings, call it the animal world or the plant kingdom, it's just been done to us. But when the human arrived on the scene, we become a conscious being, we become a conscious animal. So for the first time, we're capable of participating in our own evolution by collaborating with this force of evolution, that's Shakti. So that is the yoga that we do. We are in a state of conscious and constant contact with this mother force, this principle that is infinitely benign and also fierce, and we can enter into relationship with, and then it responds to us. And we have to ultimately have the capacity to allow that intelligence to move us and move through us. And then the work gets done so much faster. And that Shakti in each of us is our soul, right? A spark of that divinity in each of us.
Yeah, almost grounded in our heart.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think of different ways to say it and link it to other, paradigms, because I think it's really important. People might have different viewpoints. So for some people, they might see it as the life force that flows through them.
Yes.
Chi, things like that. Okay.
Yes. Having said that, think of Chi as the life force, but then there is energy even in the inanimate mineral. There is energy in beings beyond just the plant and animal and the human kingdom. So think of it as a spectrum of energy. We know light and sound has frequencies from every level. So Shakti is like the full spectrum of energy. So life force is one of them, and in the integral yoga we call it the vital.
Yes.
But we also have soul force, the psychic. We also have spiritual force. We have just basic material force, which is in the body. So actually everything is imbued with force.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really this awakening to, it's almost like the light turning on inside of you and connecting you to that first moment in your heart where you first existed and you were a child of the divine. It's kind of connecting you back to that, isn't it?
Yes. It's I think the metaphor of fish and water is perfect, because it's like there would be no fish if there were no water. Right?
Absolutely.
So we are the fish in the water of Shakti. It's about waking up to knowing that it's what's in us and around us and moving us. It's the medium in which we live. And then it's not just inanimate water, it's intelligent water. So it responds to us. It co-creates with us. In fact, we are its instruments.
Absolutely.
Right?
For evolution, right? It evolves through us by our experience.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fundamental. And so from my understanding, the best way for that to awaken for someone is to go on some kind of internal journey. So I don't know if you just want to talk through some of that, because I think when somebody awakens to their soul, it's often quite a scary feeling, because you've kind of thought you knew who you were. It's the same like you think this reality is all there is, and then you find out there's a whole lot more. And it's quite a scary feeling. So maybe you can just talk through some of that.
So I think at a very basic level, to know that we have two selves. We have our human ego, ordinary self, but we also have a divine, limitless, extraordinary self, and some people call it the higher self. And if we can learn how to use the limited self as the instrument through which we open to this higher self, then it's as if the doors have opened and you start receiving the pouring down of the grace and a sense of feeling energized and empowered, and synchronicity starts happening. And it's literally like you were walking through molasses in one dimension, and then suddenly you're flying. It feels so different.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Absolutely. And so I think another thing that's quite important is how to integrate these. And I'm assuming that that's what part of Shakti leadership is for you, when you're starting to say, let's move away from a patriarchal model, an old model of leadership. We now need to come up with, new and improved ways, and a new paradigm that's grounded in the 5D. So what are some of the things that you think are important for somebody who's now awakened to this part of themselves and now wants to start doing things differently? So they might be walking away from their old life or their old way of doing things or their old way of doing business, for example.
So we say the master key is presence. You start with cultivating presence and being present as much as you can, and catching yourself when you lose presence, and then gently bringing yourself back to presence. So to make presence your autopilot nature, so to speak, that you practice it until it just becomes your nature. Be present rather than absent, right? And then once you're present, you become aware of this creative flow that's moving through you. It's the power of your presence, which is Shakti. And then when you show up in leadership situations, you are able to respond rather than be in this reactive mode. And you're better able to respond to your leadership situation, your work situation, even your life and relationships, if you have used your presence and your power to achieve psychological wholeness. So in order to become psychologically whole, we say you've got to become the wise fool of tough love, have access to your wise parent energy, have access to your curious, wondrous inner child. You heal that wounded side of your inner child, have access to your inner masculine and access to your inner feminine. That's the tough and the love, the wise fool of tough love. And then from there, practice the skill of flexibility. Once you're psychologically whole, it's as if you have like a Swiss Army knife, you have the full set of tools you're going to need to respond to any situation. Right? It's the fourfold self, the 4 core archetypes that are inside each of us. And we become whole when we learn to express and hone each of these. So flexibility is about knowing in any moment, which of these do I need to apply? Does the situation demand my wisdom? Does it demand my lightening up and being foolish? Does it demand my tough energy, boundaries, saying no? Or does it demand me being just compassionate and accepting and loving, which is my feminine holding space self, right? So that's flexibility. And then we talk about congruence, saying you can do all this work and become psychologically whole and be present, etc. But where are you going with all that? Do you have a sense of your dharma? What is your swadharma? And that is basically who you innately are. You have to become who you essentially are. And expressing that in the world through your work. That's congruence.
Absolutely.
So finding your leadership purpose, finding your work in the world, finding that unique spot in the great scheme of things that is only yours to fill and do. By bringing all these unique qualities, you are a unique mix of masculine and feminine energy, regardless of gender.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So how do you bring that to your work? And is that meant to now be expressed in any particular project or domain of life on the planet?
Absolutely.
Then that's yours to show up and do.
For sure. And I think that's so important, especially this congruence, because for so many of us, and I have a similar story of having been in corporate for a long time, and you've really trained to be mind-centered in that place generally, because it's quite intellectual, and we've got things to do and skills, but the congruence is so much about the heart-mind congruence, isn't it? Yeah. And actually living from the heart space and the mind being the servant to the heart.
And in our yoga, we say even the heart can be the outer heart, which gets emotional. So, and the mind can be a divine mind if you learn how to go beyond the ego mind. So there is a divine heart and there is a divine mind. So actually, congruence is about learning the best of both and being aligned with the best of both. So I'm careful not to call the mind wrong and bad, because one of the very powerful tools we show in this work is from the work of Barry Johnson around polarity mapping, that you have the masculine and the feminine, and you need to leverage both in a healthy way. So just like there is the healthy feminine, there is also the healthy masculine.
Absolutely.
Right? And just like there is the unhealthy masculine, there is the unhealthy feminine.
100%. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's also about transcending the ego into the soul, isn't it? And even even transcending the personality into that place of soul. Yeah.
So since we are so happily talking a very spiritual language here, if you go beyond the outer heart, you find the immanent divine, that is the soul. Right? If you go beyond the ordinary mind, you find the cosmic divine, which is spirit. That oneness, right? So the immanent divine and the universal divine, the soul and the spirit. So the mind helps you connect. When people have awakening experiences, they break through the mind. The mind becomes the door through which they come into unity consciousness.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you go to the emotional heart, the bhakti, then you break through to this incredible love of the soul.
For sure.
So this is like the light of the spirit, and this is the love of the soul,
That's beautiful.
So there's love and light. And the mind and the heart are actually the portals through spirit and soul.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
According to the yoga.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it like that. That's amazing. And so what would be quite interesting for me is maybe just to talk about your practical experience of that, because as I step into my soul purpose and I start to function in my soul, it's almost like my soul is talking to your soul, and then spirit is flowing through me. So how do you encourage that in a workplace and kind of help people to step into that? Or, what are your thoughts about that? Because if we were all operating from our soul, we would all just be standing in 5D in that unity consciousness.
Yeah. I like to say that, the response, I've heard this from my friend Juanita Robertson, that the responsibility lies with the ones more healed. So those of us who have a little more awakening than the others, it's our job, our responsibility to show up with our presence, with our hearts open and our minds clear, so that soul force moves us and through us. And then we become like those tuning forks who very naturally invite others into their presence and their soul. It's like when you're vibrating at a particular frequency, then the others get initiated.
Acclimatized.
Well. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's really about showing up, modeling it, and holding that frequency, holding that state of being, which is quite different from the, you can tell once you develop the discernment to understand who is showing presence and who has lost presence. You can watch out for it with a lot of compassion, but it's quite easy to tell, just like if you're good at, listening to music and when someone's gone off key,
100%,
right?
100%.
So in the same way,
when you know.
tell. Yeah. And then and everything begins with leadership. So it's the leaders in the organization who have to start modeling a way of showing up with their, leading with love, leading with soul, leading with presence. And there are some affirmations we use a lot in Shakti leadership, drawn from the best practices everywhere and from the work of the Enneagram and Richard Barrett values and so on, saying that at any time, if I can be watching out for ways in which I lose presence, right? So typically we lose presence when we go into victimhood or scarcity consciousness,
our program,
right? Or feel, or the imposter syndrome, right? So the way to catch yourself and return to presence and center is to say things like, the reality of this moment is that I have nothing to defend. I have nothing to promote. I have nothing to fear. The only reality of this moment is that I am here now.
I am.
Yeah. And all I need is within me. And all I need comes to me. Right? I am enough. I have enough. And there is enough to share. Right? So when we start saying these statements, it's as if parts of ourself, and we're made up of so many selves, those parts that had lost center for whatever reason, they are reassured to return to center.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And now you're back in your flow. And then you can start modeling it for others. And the power of your presence inducts others into their presence.
Absolutely.
It's the greatest gift you can give anybody and your leadership team, the people you lead and you follow,
Absolutely. And that's also where I feel, and I've found for myself, that I stopped looking for this purpose outside of me, like driving towards purpose, because you learn to understand that your presence is your purpose. You are holding it. Yes. And that you just need to be, actually, that is purpose, right?
And then you wait for what's called the spandan. So Shakti is an infinitely creative being. And, my friend Nilima Bhat has written the book, In the Beginning is Desire. So out of pure potentiality, like the one rests in nothingness, and then out of a desire to know itself and all aspects within, there is like a frisson, there is like a wave, there's something, there's a wave that rises, a desire to be, right? And if we are that instrument to create what life desires for itself, then from that being, there is a wave of becoming that comes. And when that rises, for us to be quiet enough with our ego and our mind and our heart, and to be still enough to catch that wave when it comes, and then to ride that wave, because then that wave will fulfill itself and we simply become the instrument.
Yeah,
right?
It's like aligned, it's fully aligned action.
Yes. And it's called being in the flow,
Absolutely.
And I often say, this is something that's coming very clearly now. There's a fine line between when you're feeling high, to ask yourself to pause and say, am I feeding the addiction, or am I feeling the flow?
That's beautiful. That's really, yeah, that's really good wisdom right there. Because when you're also in that space of feeling too high, that's when you can feel ungrounded and almost not able to manifest your purpose, because you're too scattered, really. You're not in your body as such.
Yeah. So let's take this one level deeper, right? That when we lose our source connection, when we get into separation, the wound, there is such a wound and pain around the loss of connection to our flow that we create like another source for our fixes, and but that becomes the addiction. And the job is to close the door on the addiction, because otherwise we just keep going down a drain. And there's a high, and then there's a low, and there's a high, and there's a low, and it never ends. No matter what you do, you can never feed the addiction into satisfaction, So you have to close the door on that. You've got to turn around, you've got to face the wound. And the only way out is through. And you've got to be brave enough to feel what is it that you really are hurting about. And then when you can go through that wound, you find the source behind and beyond that, right? And then you reconnect with that true source. And then what flows through that source is the healing medicine that will also heal the wound.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's when you're standing in full purpose, because you faced your own trauma.
Yes.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Nilima. Yeah. Beautiful. It is a journey, but it's, these things that we're speaking about are so real and so relevant. And for so long they've, been seen as esoteric or woo-woo or whatever, but it's fundamental to our success. It really is.
Yeah. Because you see, a time comes where you have all the success and then you feel empty. And then you're like saying, this is it.
Absolutely.
There must be more. We did all the hard work and then we're still sitting around feeling unhappy or empty. So the other thing I'm noticing off late is, beyond a point, how many peak experiences can you have? Because then you had them as well. Absolutely. And then you realize, my gosh, there is a planet to be saved. There is a humanity to be healed and awakened. Yeah. Absolutely.
And your nervous system can't handle too many anyway.
Yeah. And you also realize that none of us are okay until all of us are okay, right? So then becomes the job of rolling up the sleeves and just continuing to serve and showing up. And then this is the vow of the Bodhisattva, right? That there's no point achieving enlightenment alone.
Absolutely.
If the rest of the world is still in ignorance, and suffering.
Totally.
So
that's beautiful. Absolutely. So that's great, because that's about the why.
Yes.
The why of purpose. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. Beautiful. That's an amazing place to kind of just ground it and bring it together. So thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that comes up for you as a final point, or where are you at?
Just this thing that at this time, and we're speaking on Ascension Day, and everyone's talking about moving into fifth dimension and so on. But how are we supporting each other get there? And how many of us are needed to kind of create the critical mass, right? Yes. So that the rest can just be lifted up with the power of that cohort. So I have this wild sense that what if there were 108,000 of us, who can be vibrating in this way and believing this and working this way, and how can it be connected with each other? And then that would be something, we're co-creating the new economy, the new ways of working, the new relationships, right? That would create the tipping point. And women have a big role to play in this. So even though my work is for both men and women and all genders, I really enjoy working with women. And so there's lots of very practical ways of connecting with my work and Shakti leadership and learning. There are free programs, there are paid programs, there are scholarships, part scholarship, full scholarship. So any which way to get to 108,000.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, that's an incredible vision to have. And I mean, you can just feel that it's rising and it's rising and it's rising. And we rise together.
Yes.
Together. Absolutely. Bless. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. I feel like I've been bathing in your wisdom. It's really beautiful. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I know you have something free that you're going to share with our listeners. Your leadership style assessment, the Shakti leadership style assessment.
Yes. So to make it very practical, we created this Ready Reckoner, and kind of pulled it from brilliant research and a piece in Forbes written by Caroline Turner, and we turned it into a leadership styles assessment. So we'll share the link with your audience. And when you take the test on, your behaviors, where are you more masculine, where are you more feminine? And at the end of it, you'll discover whether your leadership style is dominant masculine or are you dominant feminine. And neither is right or wrong. It is what it is. So it's a discovery piece first for yourself, but it's also a solutioning piece, because after that, you get to, apply that Ready Reckoner to say, what if I'm stuck right now in some situation in my leadership? So what is it about? Is it about how I organize my team, how I structure it, how I motivate, how I influence, or how I manage conflict? So right there, you get to discover it more deeply. What is the crux of the problem? And then it simply shows you what are you doing too much of that you should balance with the other side.
Great.
And it even tells you the very specific behaviors you need to apply.
Work with and emulate.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So it's just so direct,
Fantastic. Great. That's amazing. It's beautiful that you can really balance that extreme understanding of consciousness and esoteric, the feminine of Shakti and the practical way to lead to aligned action in every moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with my listeners. I'm really grateful. And I will send them the link, and they'll be able to get hold of you if they resonate and want to go deeper into your work. I honor you for the work that you do. I honor you for the wisdom that you share, and I see and hear and support your vision. So thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Let's do it together.
Exactly. 100%. Please.
By 2030.
Of course, before then. We don't have time. We don't have time.
It feels like there is this path to 2030. If we don't reach in time, we're either going to tank, but if we reach in time,
it'll be something else completely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Fantastic.
So
thank you so much. Definitely, but good work to do.
Good work to do.
Yeah.
We chose to be here.
Absolutely.
To do this.
100%. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Bless you. So much love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.